self-assurance is what I would call one of the ego themes, and it's really about ego that's developed more internally. If I had to kind of give a brief description of self-assurance, here's what I'm saying. This is an internal confidence to try, even though external uncertainty exists. And it really is, when people have this theme, they have this trust in their own abilities and instincts. It's the stuff that's inside of them. They're aware of it, they rely on it, they're confident in it. So it's what's inside of them is really the key part to this self-assurance. I've heard the phrase, go with your gut. I think to some degree that's a pretty good description of what self-assurance is in its kind of purest form. There's kind of this trusting in your ability, but it's also trusting in your intuition, in your instinct. And so many times people will, when I ask people, I say, are you intuitive? A lot of people will raise their hands, and I think this is one of the reasons why some people raise their hand for being intuitive. It's not because they're necessarily emotionally intuitive, like empathy. They know how someone feels or they know who someone is, but they just know something is right and know something is true just by the confidence that they have in their own who they are and what they have. This theme is a part of the influencing domain, and that's something I want to talk a little bit with Rod about. Where does the influence of self-assurance come from? We'll talk about that a little later. I was trying to think about some words that help to kind of clarify and express the essence of self-assurance, and so these are some words I came up with, and they're not new if you've been around these themes a lot. If you're new to these themes, they might be helpful in helping you to kind of get some clarity around it. Autonomous, self-reliant, independent, self-sufficient, self-governing. You'll notice a lot of self words here coming up. Self-determining, going with the gut, self-management, internal guidance system, maybe even self-control. Those would be some words that I think capture the essence of this theme. Maybe some other more adjective-like words. Obviously, we call this self-assurance, so there is confident, might be an adjective. Certain. Certainty seems to be an important word as I think about this particular theme. Sure, obviously, assurance. Cocksure sometimes is a word that's used. Unflappable. I think sometimes people who have this kind of internal kind of guidance system, them, even though things might be kind of chaotic around them, they have a kind of a stability and a unflappableness that comes. So they often may appear to be pretty calm and confident, even though things are kind of going on around the outside. So those would be, some words that make sense. We've also tried to think about what does this look like in its basement form, when it's maybe a bit more raw or undeveloped, and what might be a barrier label. How could this theme be negatively perceived? And sometimes when a person has self-assurance, could be seen, they might be seen as being somewhat aloof, maybe not really involved. We use the words lone wolf or lone ranger, and those could be not just barrierless. Sometimes being a lone ranger, I think about the Lone Ranger when I was a kid. He was a hero. So, but being a lone wolf or a lone ranger can sometimes have a negative perception, distant, disconnected, maybe unwilling to listen. I know what's right, and so those might be some barrier labels. I also try to think of some phrases or kind of maxims or sayings that might capture the essence of this. And so one of them that I didn't come up with this. It says, this is Shakespeare. This above all else to thine own self be true. Another saying I heard of is self-assurance is not being proud of yourself, it's believing in yourself. And then Rod and I were talking about this earlier. There's a kind of a connection, I think, or a similarity between the theme belief and self-assurance. Both have a certainty. One is more of an internal certainty, that's self-assurance. Belief is really a certainty that people have in some kind of value or cause or purpose or mission, but they might look similar sometimes and maybe have a similar feel to them. Um, let's see. There's a funny saying that I talk about sometimes, and this to some degree is maybe more the basement of balcony, and it's a book title that I heard, and this is a book that was kind of written by Charles Barkley, and some of you might have seen it if you watch basketball, the Final Four. I think he might have some self-assurance, but anyway, he wrote a book one time called "I May Be Wrong, but I Doubt It." And I think that kind of captures the attitude that self-assurance can have sometimes. I think it's also important to understand that self-assurance is not a very frequent theme. And our database of over 10 million people, and by the way, we just passed that mark not too long ago, only 6% of it have it in their top 5. So in other words, 6 out of every 100 people have this. So it's not a frequently found theme. It's a rare theme, which is kind of interesting because I think to some degree, especially in U.S. culture, independence seems to be something that's culturally valued, and I think to some degree culturally aspired to. So that's just kind of an interesting thought. The theme that is most likely paired, in other words, if a person has self-assurance high, what's the theme that is most frequently also found in top 5? That would be strategic. And the themes that are least likely paired with self-assurance are the themes developer and empathy, both more external in nature, whereas self-assurance tends to be a bit more internal in nature.